Jim, can I start off by asking you why you think the equity markets are not responding to the stabilization plans that are being introduced around the world at the moment?
Because they're absurd.
They're preempting the collapse of the dollar. If gold goes to 1,500, that's not because dentists are suddenly busy, filling people's teeth. It has to do with the fact that the dollar is imploding.
You've got the increasing budget deficits in the U.S., but one thing about treasuries is that the Fed has the ability to buy treasuries and literally print dollars. So you're kind of dealing with a fiat currency, and that means that rather than treasuries collapsing, you might have the dollar collapse.
China is buying lots of this stuff, gold bullion. They can't get enough of gold bullion. India is buying gold bullion. China's buying gold bullion as a way to hedge themselves against these things. This is Warren Buffett toilet paper. Warren Buffett toilet paper here, the U.S. dollar. It's going to zero.
The United States will face debt burdens in the future that would make the U.S. look like a third world nation from a public finance perspective.
And we are in the process of setting up an economic crisis much worse than the one we think we solved. The currency crisis is coming, Larry. I know you think King Dollar is potentially coming back, but it's not.
But one thing I want to stress, this crisis, nothing has been solved. That should be clear.
We have unemployment at 26-year highs. We have teenage unemployment at all-time records since they've been taking records.
We now have a financial system that's completely based on moral hazard, too big to fail. All the big banks left standing believe that they are immune from any future failure because that's what happened in the last year. That's what Tim Guyton has told them. That's what Larry Summers has told them. And crazy things happen when you have a financial system like that. Now, the conventional wisdom is you can't have back-to-back major financial crises. I think we're going to push that. We're going to have a look and see whether that's true. The next 12 months could really be exciting. People could be very positive, but we are setting ourselves up for an enormous catastrophe.
We are still concerned about more credit losses to come over the following months. The second leg of the option arm resets and Alt-A loans has now commenced. And money is just pouring into all sorts of assets because people are getting very, very worried about inflation and the loss of purchasing power of paper money because central banks are just destroying the value of paper money, they're debasing the currencies, and that's why stocks, commodities, precious metals, everything is going up and the value of paper money is going down.
I mean, I tell you, when you look at the United States, you cannot imagine that they can solve their problems.
It's not a recovery, it's a cover-up.
The next country that is very vulnerable would be, say, Japan or the United States, and also in Europe, within the EU, we have the so-called PIGS, in other words, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain. And debt defaults throughout history has been very common for centuries. Sovereign states have defaulted on their obligations. Usually it happens because they borrow too much and just can't pay.
Now here we are, 1 year later in September of 2009, and they're talking about the possibilities of a recovery.
The employment situation hasn't improved much. I don't think that employment will improve very much. It may stabilize but not improve much.
They're saying that the stimulus program is now working. Well, what's going to happen when the stimulus runs out? When you can't use this paper money to create any more jobs? This is the likes of which no one has ever seen before. There will not be a recovery. We're going into the greatest depression. People better grow up about it. The jobs that have been lost forever.
We committed $11 trillion to the financial system. So no wonder that with such a massive policy stimulus, the markets and the economy have recovered. The question is how we're going to pay for it over time. At which point the fiscal deficit is going to become unsustainable, at which point this monetization of fiscal deficit is going to be also dangerous, and therefore, in my view, we're partly stealing demand from the future and will pay for the consequences of excessive policy stimulus down the line.
Well, we would all have a depression, or as simple as that. The policymakers all over the world thought that it was best to prolong or basically postpone the problem by injecting this huge amount of stimulus, by printing money and creating inflation. And although the Chinese are using their own money, I think the situation in the West is even worse because the governments don't even have the money. They're borrowing money, they're printing money.
And again,
we must answer history's call. 1 year ago, I took office amid 2 wars, an economy rocked by a severe recession, a financial system on the verge of collapse, and a government deeply in debt. And 1 year later, the worst of the storm has passed.
We have people in power that if our forecasts were as wrong as theirs, we would have been laughed out of business 30 years ago when we began. Why would people believe Ben Bernanke? Why would they believe President Obama? Why would they believe Larry Summers or Timothy Geithner? One after another, their forecasts have been wrong, and they're wrong about the recovery.
If I had come on your show every week for 100 weeks in a row and everything I said to you was wrong, would you keep me on your show? Would you have any confidence in me? Would you listen to me? Mr. Paulson, Mr. Bernanke, and the guy at the New York Fed, Tim somebody, every week they have been dead wrong. Why would you listen to them?
So gold continues to do well, and every time I come on television, people keep asking me, is it too late? Is it the top? I don't think we're anywhere near the top. As long as we continue to debase the money, as long as we keep stimulating the economy with printing money, the dollar is going to keep falling, gold is going to keep rising.
So where is the top, Peter?
I don't know. There's no necessary top because there's no low to the dollar. What gold simply tells you is what the U.S. dollar is worth or what other currencies are worth. It's a measure of purchasing power. So as the dollar loses value, you need more dollars to buy something like gold. Gold is not changing in value. It's the dollar that's losing value.
The minute you think of gold as money, that level is, it's a range between $4,000 and $11,000 an ounce. That's how much. That's the price gold would have to be to support the money supply. I talk to people about gold, and they say, well, there's not enough gold to support the money supply. And I say, well, of course there's enough gold, just a question of price.
This is going to unleash rampant inflation around the world, rampant confusion in the currency markets, and you're going to have currencies gyrating all over the world, bond markets are going to start to collapse, and then we're going to have a real problem, and that's why the stock market understands this. They're unleashing a inflationary holocaust because they don't know what else to do, and they're making mistakes.
The other thing that is the kind of thing that will be a disaster, not just for the US, but for Western Europe, is the unfunded pension fund liabilities and contingent liabilities arising from Medicare and Medicaid, and now Obama's new health care program.
We're talking 55 trillion plus in a hole, the federal government. 55 trillion plus. And secondly, nobody's going to bail out America. We're going to have to solve our own problem. People have not learned. You got people lining up at the trough. Government doesn't have any money. We don't have any money. And what's going on right now is massive taxation without representation.
Many governments have borrowed staggering amounts of money. The United States government and the United States Central Bank have, the numbers are just, they can't even calculate them. Partly because they've got so many off-balance sheet, things they've guaranteed and they don't know how big they are.
There's no combination of growth, no feasible combination of growth and taxes that can fund that liability.
We need to pay half.
We need to pay half. We can pay 30 trillion, not 60. So 4% inflation for 17 years cuts the value of the dollar in half. And that's what the Fed does best.
We have a money printer at the Fed, and he will print money and keep interest rates at zero, basically. And when one day interest rates should go up, he'll keep them below the rate of inflation, as Mr. Greenspan and he did after 2001, when interest rates were continuously below the cost of living increase.
If you had a nickel and 3 pennies in your hand, you had 8 cents. That's the value of the dollar relative to 1913 when the Fed was created. So the idea of price stability is nonsense. What they do is inflate the dollar to sort of prop up the banks. So they need to do that, but that's a dynamically unstable process. So if you try, they would love to do it gradually, and that's the plan. But if the market gets ahead of it, if the market sees this playing out, which they probably will, you could have a very rapid collapse of the dollar. That would be you'd see that in gold.
America has absolutely no intention whatsoever of repaying China that $1 trillion. America will never pay China back that $1 trillion, and they're forcing China to buy more dollars to keep their own currency from rising thus killing their export market. And China has got itself into a conundrum.
How long would you continue to lend to somebody who kept saying, don't worry, I'm going to pay you back, and everything's going to be okay, after year after year after year?
You're talking about economic Armageddon here.
Yes, absolutely. That I'm convinced. The fiscal deficit of around $2 trillion will add, of course, to government debt. It will be, in future, very difficult for the Federal Reserve to increase short-term rates, because then the interest payments on the debt go up substantially. Then comes Medicare and Medicaid after 2018, and we have huge liabilities there that are coming due. And with the aging of the baby boomers, we'll have a huge problem in funding the expenditures of the government. And so they'll have to inflate. And then to divert the attention from the public, the governments then go to war. Yeah, sure, the states are in deep trouble. I mean, some have deficits of 40–45% of their expenditures. And I don't see a solution there.
The government is actually a source of our problems, that the stimulus is not the solution. The stimulus is why the economy is so messed up in the first place. And I want to go to Washington and put an end to that. We got to stop the spending and stop the money printing. And we have to let free market forces repair the damage done to this economy by government intervention.
You have to understand how we got into this mess. We got into this mess by spending too much, borrowing too much, and inflating too much. Government was too big and we had too many regulations. We had rejected the market economy for decades now. We had rejected the notion of sound money for decades. And we got into a mess this way. So what is the proposal? Spend more money, borrow more money, print more money, regulate more so. So it makes no sense whatsoever. So we're going to make the problems much worse. We're doing exactly what we did in the 1930s. We are determined to take a serious recession and turn it into a depression.
And so I take the view, eventually we'll have hyperinflation.
We're in the midst right now of the second American Revolution. Revolutions don't happen from the people that are going to be watching American Idol or waste their time away playing video games and their minds lost. It's going to come from a different area. You have people from both ends of the spectrum, on the far right and the far left, becoming anti-Obama. So the revolution is now being fought by a number of different factions within both the Republican and Democratic Party. And that's what's going to make this revolution happen. Current events form future trends. Look where the dollar's going, and look where gold is